Got some good new bread.
Yeah.
Good bread and good tennis.
Yeah, we had good tennis.
Was it tidy?
Of course. We're not as good as they had been, no.
After all that work?
Well, that's what happens if you've got a set of tennis courts under some trees. It gets worse as time goes on.
The trees are the bad guys.
The trees are the bad guys, and we are right.
Back to that.
Mm-hmm. You can't escape from that.
Paranoia, the mind beside itself, becomes metanoia, the mind with itself and so free from itself. Free from clutching at themselves the hands can handle. Free from looking after themselves the eyes can see. Free from trying to understand itself, thoughts can think. In such feeling, seeing and thinking, life requires no future to complete itself, nor explanation to justify itself. In this moment, it is finished. What is this? Sounds interesting.
It's Corbin Lewis. He was liking your Morning Post. That one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which a post I particularly find difficult to understand because this is.
You know what paranoia is, but not what metanoia is.
Well, I don't know the point this bloke is making.
It's the final paragraph of the whole book.
Yeah, no, but it still makes no sense. It should still make sense even if you haven't read the book.
The final paragraph of a book should make sense even if you haven't read the book.
That is true. Right?
That's not true. What do you think of Corbin Lewis?
Couldn't commit myself to saying I like it because I couldn't hear what he was singing.
You don't know what it means. You should know what it means.
Well, I need to know what it means.
The quest for meaning. Fresh bread again.
All the way from the other side of Dorset.
Which bakery
It's
again?
still West Dorset.
Evershot.
Evershot.
From the depths of Dorset.
How much healthier is this bread, do you think, than the white bread?
Much, much healthier.
And what makes it healthier?
It's not quantifiable because with white bread you're on negative healthiness.
Negative healthiness.
And this is positive healthiness. So it's not a
it-
quantifiable difference in terms of multiplicity.
Is it that stark? White bread bad, whole wheat bread good?
That's possibly true. But I am about to make it less good than it was by having lots of milk-based product.
We're experts now.
Obviously.
Today we're experts
Certainly
on
more
nutrition.
expert than we are on river flows.
Yeah, Mum truly is more in her natural habitat when we're having a conversation about nutrition than when we're investigating
Definitely.
the channels.
Yeah.
So, according to your truly expert opinion,
Yeah.
why is this bread so much better than the other bread?
Because it's got lots of fibre, and fibre is good for your body. It helps all your other food get through your system better. White bread, the flour has been processed more than the wholemeal flour.
Okay, and the fibre is good for your holistic health. It makes everything.
It makes it process through your body better. It's better for your digestion as well, so your gut health.
Gut health.
Yeah,
And you've read a whole book about the gut.
yeah. But I will have forgotten most of that book, so don't read anything to that.
Is butter good?
As long as you don't have too much of it.
Everything in moderation.
Exactly, yeah.
And you were also emphasizing walking is good for the body because it gets blood pumping
Yeah.
from
I
the
think-
heart into the mind,
Is the brain?
into the brain, not the mind. Yeah. Okay, great.
Can I eat now?
Yeah, that's our starting point. Yeah, eating is important.
If you've got Evershot brown bread.
Yeah. As long as you're not going to film me eating.
No. Private eating time. In 3, 2, 1. In the chapter where she encourages picking flowers, another task she encourages is baking. And then in this completely separate chapter, right at the end, Recovering a Sense of Faith, the final chapter, just after the idea of not pulling up ideas by the roots, she uses a baking metaphor. Hatching an idea is a lot like baking bread. An idea needs to rise. If you poke at it too much at the beginning, if you keep checking on it, it will never rise. A loaf of bread or a cake, baking, must stay for a good long time in the darkness and safety of the oven. As you're making your mincemeat for, for Christmas. And you do a lot of baking.
Yeah.
And we've been watching the Great British Bake Off.
Yeah.
Does that image resonate?
Have you ever seen this film?
I don't think I actually have.
No. You have to make sure you're eating it.
What do you mean?
Concentrate on the film.
Oh, okay. And not just the image, but the fact that you bake and you also garden and you also do creative work.
I'm not quite sure how I would link them.
Patience again.
Patience, yes, I can understand that because yes, once you especially cakes, if you put them in the oven, you mustn't open the oven because they will sink, and the same with bread. So yeah, patience is very much a part of it, and yes, that definitely comes into gardening because you've got to be patient, you've got to wait for things to grow. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah.
Wait for seeds to germinate. You know, there's a lot of patience involved in that.
Especially given how much you're relating to a lot of the stuff at the end, I'm interested in how much you can relate to her account of what creativity essentially is, which is what she'll begin with.
Right.
She claims that we are all creative. Through my own experience and that of countless others I have shared, I have come to believe that creativity is our true nature, that blocks are an unnatural thwarting of a process at once as normal and as miraculous as the blossoming of a flower at the end of a slender green stem. What do you think about that? Do you think we're all creative? And do you think that that process of the blossoming of a flower at the end of a slender green stem is both normal and miraculous?
Yes, and I think it gets blocked as you grow up on the whole, unless you move into a very creative environment. But for most people, it gets blocked because it doesn't fit in with the normal work or anything else. So people, it's probably why they choose gardening, because it's still a little element of being creative, or baking. There are ways of still being creative, but for lots of people, they lose the creative side because life takes over.
I'm still thinking about Corbyn and his music.
I'm halfway through messaging him asking if I can use his music.
Are you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't even know what it says yet.
We'll figure out what it means.
Given he's the only person who's so far liked your posting, I'm a bit worried about the nature of his thinking.
You thought that post that he liked doesn't make any sense. Can you remember anything about it and why it doesn't make sense? What struck you as not making sense about it?
There's a lot of gravestones in it.
Well, that was just
That was just a video.
that was just the scene. I was just waiting when Mum got her previous bread.
Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of statements that because I can't make any rational sense of each one, it's impossible to keep them in my brain. So I can't remember what they were.
You can't keep it in your brain.
No, anything
Is that a
makes
scientific
no sense.
statement about?
Yeah, anything that can't be made sense of passes straight through my brain.
Alan Watts is saying a lot of things about the brain in that book.
Is that right?
Yeah, there's a schism between the brain, more specifically the cortex, and the rest of the body. Otherwise, he's kind of being, I think, a little bit reductive in terms of a conflict between the brain and the body. And in that one moment, he says there's a schism between specifically the cortex and the rest of the body. When we go to the field, you can simultaneously help us make sense of what's going on. But what? What do we think about what he's saying about the brain?
Oh, that's really spoiled it for me.
How is it spoiled of me?
I thought you were going to be reminiscing about my childhood antics.
Oh yeah, we'll do that too.
Well, it won't work now.
That'll be more for next week.
So I've got to go through this Watts stuff.
We'll talk about what's a bit.
Yeah. Okay.
You're sceptical about him.
There's a spectrum of comprehensibility amongst philosophers, and
It's not at the right end for me.
But he is saying effectively that we're too caught up in our heads. And
what?
That there's a wisdom to the body, and as Westerners we're too caught up in our heads.
Oh, very likely.
Yeah, you seem to agree with that.
Well, without giving it any thought at all, I just allowed myself to say I agree. Yeah.
You haven't given it space in your brain.
No, I'm still rejecting that rubbish.
I'm interested because you're using the metaphor of the brain being like a storage house where there's only a certain amount of space.
Well, it's not a metaphor, that's a practical observation.
That's just scientific fact.
Yeah, it's a logical, observable conclusion. That
Which part of the brain is the
there
storage
must be
space?
a capacity to how much information the brain can contain.
We were talking about the academia milieu before.
Mm-hmm.
She suggests that we all live in a milieu where a false belief that work has to be arduous is cultivated.
Yeah.
Whereas it's entirely possible, and she would argue natural, to experience an interplay of work and play.
Mm-hmm.
Undoing the conditioning that leads us to have a disbelief in that possibility is one of the core components of discovering and recovering your creative self.
Yes,
Okay.
I can see that makes sense, but I can also imagine that there are lots of workplaces where that just isn't possible. If you happen to be intelligent and have got money, then the sort of work choice you can choose might enable you to be creative in it. But if you don't have a really good education, so the job you get is very menial, or you work in a factory or something, then it would be very difficult to incorporate that.
It's interesting though, because you're saying about a good education, but we've been recognizing that the academic milieu can be precisely what works against discovering creative flow.
Yeah, well, there's a balance, isn't there, somewhere in the middle, I think.
Yeah. Is there any connection between learning that you experienced at school and your creativity in relation to between gardening and creativity? Because if there's more of a connection between the non-academic side of you and creativity, that would seem to suggest formal education is not necessary to work and play creatively.
I think formal education is necessary, well, for most people, to earn an income which enables you to have time to be creative. And I think sometimes it probably comes into what you're doing, because even with some of the stitching I do, if I'm making a quilt, a lot of that relies on very accurate measuring. So you could argue that some knowledge of maths and how numbers work is quite essential to be able to work that out.
Well, that's the logic brain, like the cortex.
Yes. Yeah.
We sit down and we know things, and we make a plan. We know this is how things are, so therefore I will do this. And that does have an important role to play, even within creativity and within life.
Yeah.
But it can also not serve us if it is too controlling.
Yes, I mean, I think when you're very young, you're allowed to make a mess with art, aren't you? But on the whole, the older you get, the less mess you make.
The less mess you're allowed to make.
Yes, and I think a lot of art courses encourage you to almost just play with the materials, to not expect an outcome, but to physically just play with the materials.
Because that process of play is crucial.
Yes.
What are you stopping for?
I want you to take a good look at that face.
Who is it?
George Bailey.
Oh, you mean the kid that had his ears slapped back by the druggies?
That's the kid.
The brain is a container, like a storage space.
Yeah.
And it's
With
logical.
filing, it's got filing stuff.
The brain is like a folder with different filing spaces in it.
Yeah.
It's considerably more complicated than a folder, than one folder.
Yeah.
It's a multiplicity of folders, and some of them overlap each other.
It's like a kind of filing cabinet, really.
Yeah, yeah. So,
And
Susan's
you've got
more tidy than
connections
mine.
going to these different things, and as you get older, some of those connections stop working. And if you're lucky, you form new connections to still enable you to be able to make sense of whatever it was. But not everybody manages to get the new connections, and that's
No.
when gradually words disappear and
Is
things
that
get
why
confusing.
old memories are more longer lasting than new memories?
Possibly.
So the brain is part of the body. The brain is the part of the body that helps us connect things, make sense of things. What is the function of the part of the body that is the brain?
There's lots of things, isn't it? Lots of things. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Like the storage thing is a small part of the lots of things it has to do.
For Bessel van der Kolk, in The Body Keeps the Score, there are metaphors for thinking about different parts of the brain.
Yeah.
So you have the watchtower, and that's the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one part of the brain that's metaphorically understood as a watchtower. The war table in Into the Field is connected to something called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is the part that relates to plan forming, forming a plan. You sit at the war table in Into the Field,
Yeah.
and you make a plan.
Yeah.
And then that's completely unconnected to the amygdala, which is the smoke detector part of the brain.
So generally speaking, if you're busy making plans, you won't be alert to emerging danger.
Yeah, those two parts of the brain are not in conversation.
So it would take quite a big alarm signal to distract you from your planning activity.
Yeah, there could be real danger. You're caught up in implementing your plan, and your smoke detector, your amygdala, is doing you the service of alerting you to that danger. But you're not paying attention because you're so caught up in the planning.
Yeah.
In your case then, so when you're caught up with solving your Raggler issues,
Yeah.
and I say that there's a big danger that all of your desk is going to be swamped with all this paper and all these things need sorting. You don't see that because you're caught up in your Raggler.
That's my excuse.
Yeah, yeah. The danger of being overwhelmed
But
with bits
that
of
isn't
paper.
the danger. What is the danger of you getting concerned about it?
Alarm bells.
That might even interfere with my feeding.
I think that's another issue as you get older. You are very aware of the value of things. The fact that the paper you're using costs money. All the materials you use cost money. Therefore, you're much less willing to just play with them and possibly spoil them.
So on the one hand, an awareness of the monetary value of things might still creativity.
Yes.
But on the other hand, an awareness of the monetary value of things will stop someone from becoming destitute.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
And it's less enjoyable to be creative if you're destitute.
Yes. Yes, because that doesn't feed you.
This all comes up in the Recovering a Sense of Abundance chapter, which is the one where she suggests tasks of baking and gardening at the end. Do you know the passage about the lilies of the field? There's like a biblical passage about the lilies of the field. They just grow. They don't think about growing. And they're abundant. She says, for many of us, raised to believe that money is the real source of security, a dependence on God. She talks about God a fair amount. A dependence on God feels foolhardy, suicidal, even laughable. When we consider the lilies of the fields, we think they are quaint. We're the ones who keep clothes on our backs. We're the ones who buy the groceries. And we will pursue our art, we tell ourselves, when we have enough money to do it easily.
And time.
Money and time. In the book Metaphors We Live By, we think about money and time using a lot of the same language and concepts. So spending time, I can't spend time on that. We talk about time as if it's money.
Yes. And for some people it is.
This chapter is called Recovering a Sense of Abundance. So if you have a sense of abundance, you think there's ample time and there's ample money. And then the opposite of abundance is scarcity. And then you think, but there might not be enough time actually. better not decide to do this project, or I can't afford it. So that's interesting, the scarcity mindset and abundance mindset. She has a whole chapter, mostly focused on how as an adult we might want to find ways that are not dangerous to reconnect with the inner child that isn't held back by the scarcity mindset.
Yeah. The footage come right up here to see. You might sit there, yeah.
Yeah. Water's doing new things again.
Yeah.
Suppose we better head down to the tennis court.
Yeah.
Cheers. Weather's particularly nice today.
Pardon?
It's particularly nice and sunny today, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, what's this got to do with what's trying to articulate something that's worth listening to?
The two of you have just helped us reintegrate the more subtle appreciation of different brain regions that we have in The Body Keeps the Score. You can help us debunk Watts and make him completely irrelevant if you want to.
Well, it wouldn't take much effort, really, because what he says makes no sense. So, you know, that's a kind of done deal. We can do that before we spoil our visit to the field.
So Watts is essentially saying that we're too heady. He would like what you're doing, Dad.
Well, clearing the table.
No, Mum likes that. What?
Don't take it away, look.
Oh, yeah, he hasn't finished.
He's only started.
That's true. He's got a distraction going on.
We're having an intellectual debate about what the brain is.
I'm not sure about the intellectuality of this debate. Yeah, we're talking.
You don't have brain space for it in your storage
Well, I'm not sure
locker.
I'm taking it that seriously, that's the trouble.
That's your role.
Yes, it is. It's the role I can safely take.
Not taking it seriously, which is good. Yeah, there's a really good YouTube video which I can show you of Alan Watts called Work is Play. There is, in our culture, a limiting belief that work has to be arduous and not fun. There's this stark
I'll go with that.
distinction
I bet
between
Watts
work and
didn't
play.
say that.
Yeah, Watts kind of counters that.
There you go.
And related to...
What does he know?
Did he ever do a good day's work?
That's the question, yeah.
Or did he just sit doing nothing, coming up with these crazy
Philosophising.
ideas? Exactly, yeah.
He's too brainy for his own good,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you would think. But his...
Yeah, if your brain is stuffed with too many words, it's not surprising that you can't string them together to make any sensible sentences.
His theory, though, you would agree with his theory that we're relying on the brain too much. We've become unnatural.
Oh yeah,
So in
I'm
your
very comfortable with that observation.
Yeah, this is what's in your terminology.
Lovely.
We've become unnatural.
This is the dumbed down version that I might understand. Okay.
We've become unnatural. Become too brainy. We think too much.
Yeah.
We use complicated words.
Oh yeah, we separate ourselves too much from the physicality of life.
Yeah, it's actually impossible to separate ourselves from the physicality of life. But we've formed lots of brainy ideas. We are boffins. We've become boffins.
I'm not sure most people have become boffins.
He'd start by agreeing with you that there are some boffins that have a problem, they read too much, and so on. And he'd say that's kind of indicative of what we're all like.
Okay.
So he agrees with you. He's just a boffin who agrees with you.
Yeah. Poor bloke. Perhaps I should watch his video.
Let's watch Work is Play. It's
Yeah.
short and it's fun.
Okay.
But what I like most of all is to set an arrow free, like it were a bird. You know, when he gets far up in the sky, whee! Watch it. And it suddenly turns.
Cheers.
Drop. What is it that fascinates us about it?
Weather's particularly nice today.
You can actually see in the distance, which is the land clearly today, up there.
Everyone else forgot their coffee.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone walking along with a coffee before.
You're making up for lost time there.
Views.
So he goes through that traffic, avoiding this and avoiding that, taking a fare like this, and he makes some music of the whole thing. And instead of thinking, have I got it really clean, as my mother taught me with an angry voice, that I had to get every little scrap out, she got angry at me. Instead, like this. And you dig, and you swing that plate around.
Are you on board?
You let the rinsing water go.
Well, this is more for me.
Crazy. See?
So that's what I do every time.
You always dance.
You get this rhythm. See? And you're not under compulsion. They called it playing the piano. But actually, they said you must play.
Do you dislike him for different reasons?
I think he's just crazy.
But it's about.
Oh, how are you? I'm good. How about you? I'm okay, yeah. So are you doing any of the Zooming? No, I quit out of the group.
So are you playing yourself?
No, I haven't been playing at all.
Oh, well, that's a shame. Do you know, with the garden, there's no time for anything else. I begrudge it, really. I don't. I mean, I enjoy it, but
Yeah.
I do begrudge it.
It's your natural environment.
Going back to the walk and you saying that that's available to anybody, you know, that it is, but even that comes down to whether you can give that sort of time to just being and looking.
Can you afford to?
Yes, because if you're a busy working mother, you probably rush in from work and you've got to feed your children, and then you can't go out because you've got to look after your children. And so actually time becomes a very precious thing. And I think for a lot of people, they don't actually have the time to be able to do that because they've got too much other responsibilities. They're a carer, or they're just working long hours. They're exhausted when they get home. So although in principle everybody has got that option, I think in reality they don't.
A lot of focus throughout this book is on being very clear first and foremost with yourself about the importance of finding time. First thing that you do after getting out of bed, before your brain is able to get into kind of planning mode, when you're still
Daily routine mode.
Yeah, it reminds me of the image of the citizens sleeping,
Yeah.
creating the reality of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is, okay, once you emerge from your dreams, the first thing that you do is write. Not necessarily if you're a writer. If your art is purely visual art, if you're just working with fabrics, if you have no intention to write a poem or anything in your life, still, one of the two tools that are referred to throughout the book is first thing you do when you get out of bed, you just write for 3 pages. Whatever's within just flows out onto the page. Does it seem strange that that would be presented as a tool, as one of two fundamental tools to enable discovery and recovery of your creative self?
No, it doesn't seem strange because, as you say, it's before the routine of the day and the mundanity of life almost has taken over. It's when your brain is still probably half dreaming almost. So no, that all makes sense. But I still don't think it's possible for everybody to do it.
To make time for it.
No, because if you, and I go back to being a mother, if you've got very young children, they've probably come in and woken you up. There's no way that you've then got time to go and do something else. They are there and they need attention straight away. And in some ways, even if you think, well, okay, I'll wake up a bit earlier than that,
Which is the idea.
You probably aren't going to manage to do that because you are so tired from managing life and children and work that you need the sleep more than you need that. So actually, that may not happen because you are always going to be exhausted. So I think talking from the perspective of a mother and knowing how exhausting it was, especially when children are very young, it's almost a permanent exhaustion. So the idea of anything else is just impossible. And it's only really now, as I've got older and there aren't all the other pressures, that I feel as if I've got time to in any way really be creative.
As usual, he climaxes with some utter nonsense.
Thank you for watching it all. Was there any aspect of it that you particularly disliked or liked?
It is a bit sad that people who drive buses might feel that they hate their job.
I find it slightly scary that he's saying you don't have to live, because that's almost inviting people to commit suicide who's finding life tough. I think it's actually a very bad thing what he's saying because of that.
There's an irresponsibility
Yes.
to his perhaps privileged
Very
assertion.
definitely.
privileged to be able to say
Very
that.
definitely. If you've got money and maybe you've got someone else doing your housework for you and someone else getting your meals, then yeah, you can definitely play all the time. But for most normal people, that's not what life is about.
The parts of him that you agreed with, perhaps, it's like when he's talking about growth.
I'm not sure I even agree with that. He seemed to be very simplistic about why this plant was growing. It's growing just because it's growing.
I could live with him saying plants are different. I couldn't live with him saying follow this plant because it's showing you how to live as human. That's not the case.
For an awful lot of people, life is drudgery.
That just is true.
Yes, I think so. I think it's very hard to get away from
the
that.
importance of getting the work done that enables you to feed yourself.
Yes.
It's trivialising it to say we'll just die then because it's not that important after you're dead.
He said, you don't have to worry anymore. No, but you leave an awful lot of people that do.
You've done a posting today which lists a whole lot of his stuff. I've only read it once and didn't understand it the first time, so I didn't bother to go back. So I haven't got any idea what he said. But you've used it, and I don't know why you have.
Well, I don't vehemently disagree with him to the extent that you do. I think I fundamentally agree with the idea that there's a wisdom to the body, and our thoughts might be at odds with that.
Well, we'd have to dwell on that because I don't understand what the wisdom of the body might be.
Well, in The Body Keeps the Score book, there's a wisdom to the amygdala, the smoke detector. It's part of the brain. The brain isn't just a filing cabinet. All natural things want to persist and ideally to thrive.
Yeah, well that sort of means that if you cut your finger, it will eventually heal itself if you don't do too big a job on it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I have to listen to my finger to be able to find out what to do today. Does that make sense to you?
Your finger heals Your finger's healing itself, though. The whole organism that is you
Yeah.
is kind of hardwired to heal itself.
Yeah.
And these two books, what's happening here?
Oh, a long outstanding tidying up details being attended to by a dear wife.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Tell me your name.
Simon's my name.
I like your outfit.
It's up. Yeah, it says grow with the flow on the back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been working hard to try and persuade people that I'm not the maintenance man.
You're not doing very well, are you?
I'm not doing at all well, no.
And you're working hard so that everyone can play. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. I'm Simon.
Hi Simon, how you keeping, alright?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Do you need help moving?
Every time I hear that someone's feeling low, remind them that them problems in your mind and not your soul. Here we go.
Good job. Yep. Okay.
And that's an understatement if you undecided. Everything's connected.
So in Workers' Play, Alan Watts talks about the ethos with which you complete a task. You can do it with a flourish. Right now, my job is collecting these big sticks so that play can happen. Serious business. Have to make sure it's safe for the parents to have their fun.
Everything you want, you got to work hard for it.
Like that.
Yep.
You need to use this tool, pick them up and put them in there for Dad.
Sounds good.
Instead of getting medicated, I elevated and got acquainted with the greatness. They saying my prayer sounding premeditated. I'm grateful when they say my statements are sounding supernatural. I say that's not me, that's you. What you radiate's coming back to you. Sun is shining. Open your mind up if you never tried it, and look inside it if you need some guidance. And look excited when you see me gliding, cause you understand on this trip of life who's the passenger and who's the pilot. Everything's connected. Everything's connected. We're all just a part of it. Everything's connected. Everything's connected. We're all just a part of it. Everything's connected. Everything's connected. We're all just a part of it. Everything you want, everything you want, you got to work hard for it.
This whole debate here is really good because I don't fully agree with Watts, but that's a very influential book.
Is it?
Yeah. Alan Watts was the foremost interpreter of Eastern thought, in particular Zen Buddhism, to the West. For my Back to the City, Minneapolis music and mental health book, that's the book that two of the people that I'm writing chapters on referenced as the book that had influenced them the most. Anna Stein and Lydia Liza both referenced that book as having informed their records.
I could imagine his thoughts helping someone who needs to shake off the worst side of Western culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't imagine them wanting to build their life around it.
You're saying building life around, we do need to have somewhat of a plan for constructing a life.
Yeah,
he's good at recognizing where the plan can get in the way.
Yeah.
We don't need to go as far as Alan Watts goes in making planning and being responsible and working hard bad. The brain, when we actually look at it and study it scientifically and think, well, what is the brain? And what different regions are there in the brain? And how does the brain relate to the other organs, like the gut? You talked about the gut before. Some thinking happens with the gut, some thinking happens with the heart.
Yes, I know, and I'll bring in another observation that I talked about my finger, and if it was cut, it would mend itself. But
Yeah.
Sue plays the piano, and she'll confirm that there is such a thing as finger memory. That when you play a piece often enough, your fingers know as much about it as your brain when it comes to playing it. It becomes almost automatic.
Automated.
Yeah.
Remember the autonomic nervous system
Mm.
from the earlier videos and the car outside? You got the accelerate and the brake
Yeah.
and the Wim Hof breathing. Our body is regulating heartbeat and breathing. We never plan, okay, how many breaths am I going to have today? And at what rate is my
You
heart
can
rate?
manage your breathing. You can slow it down.
Exactly, and the Wim Hof is an extreme version of that.
Yeah.
Where if you manage your breathing in a particular way, you can do what generally scientists had previously thought was impossible, which is have some control over the autonomic nervous system.
So okay, I'm going to revisit your posting and to see if I can see any relevance in his words and the images you're showing.
Yeah.
In the juxtaposition of those.
Paranoia, the mind beside itself, becomes metanoia, the mind with itself and so free from itself. Free from clutching at themselves the hands can handle. Free from looking after themselves the eyes can see. Free from trying to understand itself, thoughts can think. In such feeling, seeing and thinking, life requires no future to complete itself, nor explanation to justify itself. In this moment, it is finished.
Was it the Merry Christmas wreath from the window?
No, that's electric the office.
Is it snowing?
Yeah, it's dark.
Where's your coat and hat?
Up at the office.
What's the matter?
Nothing the matter.
Come on, let's go. We get this car up, way up at the top. There it is. Still in that little bare spot right there. Isn't it wonderful about Harriet? Well, famous, George. But I had heavy gold today about the grave, the banquet. Your mother's so excited.
So you like things to be orderly.
Yeah.
What she says in the opening pages of the introduction is when the word God is used in these pages, you may substitute, you may want to do this, the thought good, orderly direction.
Yeah.
Or flow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like an acronym. God,
Yeah.
good, orderly direction.
Okay.
So maybe you take that advice as someone who likes order and who doesn't believe in God.
Yes.
Then you do believe maybe in good, orderly flow.
Yes. Yeah.
And she says, just try using it. By the simple scientific approach of experimentation and observation, a workable connection with the flow of good, orderly direction, aka God, can easily be established. What do you think of that sentence?
I'm a bit confused by that sentence.
So she's saying people who do believe in God, insofar as it relates to an actual thing that perhaps you can relate to as well, we can call it good, orderly direction or flow. And there are certain tools that can be used and practices that can be cultivated that will deepen and enrich the connection with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just a state of mind, the good, orderly direction state of mind, where your love of order and your need to have things be in order stops being a block and becomes something which enables.
It definitely does enable me, yes. I mean, you only have to look at my shelves over there that are all very ordered. There are different fabrics in different boxes, there are different wools in different boxes. I've got a cupboard there that's full of things that are all very organised.
Yeah. So here you have order that you have created.
Yes.
And then when you go on your walks or when you're gardening and you're having to let things be a bit and you're responding to things that you're not expecting and you're acknowledging the virtue of that, that becomes something that you're seeking and enjoying there. What's the relationship or the difference between the order that you have created and the good, orderly direction or flow that you experience, say, when you're gardening or when you're walking?
That's a difficult one.
Because they're both order.
Yeah. When I started working on this book, I didn't actually know how I was going to decorate it. So I just started by doing the things that I'd seen her do in the workshop. She had got a few ideas, and once you start doing that, then actually your imagination comes into it and more ideas come. But it is allowing yourself the time to just do that and just let it happen almost.
Yeah, giving yourself the gift of time.
Yes.
She does. She is quite insistent that anyone can find the time for the morning pages and for the artist date, and that, you know, if you're going to recover, she uses that framework throughout, then that's the practice. These are the tools.
Oh, this isn't going to be so easy. Yeah, so you still think killing yourself would make everyone feel happy, eh?
Well, I don't know. I guess you're right. I suppose it's been better if I'd never been born at all.
What you say?
I said I wish I'd never been born.
do it.
In a final chapter called Religion Reviewed, Watts concludes, "Thought has moved full circle, and we are again as children. To those still feverishly intent upon explaining all things, this confession says nothing and means nothing but defeat.